wacky bits.
Hey guys, MBG here today with a look at an ancient relic from the past, the White Dwarf 98 from, I believe it was February of 1988. So it's over 25 years old and probably about the exact age of, I guess the target demographic of 40K these days is about 25 to 34. So right on the cusp of the majority of the age, I guess, of what this game is marketed to. So it's kind of interesting. Anyways, it's a great magazine, and it's going to seem a little bit different from the White Dwarfs of today. Which, by the way, this magazine only cost a dollar or 1.25 pounds. So about a tenth less of the current day's pricing 25 years ago. I don't know what the math on that but it seems kind of silly to me. Anyways, this version of White Dwarf. The focus of Games Workshop was RPGs and small standalone board games and things like that. Back in the 80s and early 90s, that was kind of their focus, and they did that and it helped them grow and everything. And once they got all their business parameters in line towards the late 90s and things like that, obviously once they picked up the Hobbit movies or the Lord of the Rings movies, things moved pretty quick for them. But anyways, back on target. So there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that's not really going to be of any use to any of us. It's just kind of silly. It's like RPG content and things like that because there was no internet. There was no other ways to really get this information out there. So you would buy a source book, and then you would pick up this White Dwarf magazine every month, and you would get new content and things like that. And that's kind of how it was for 40K, even into the mid 90s before the release of second edition and things like that, and even the late 90s with the Rogue Trader chapter approved, where they keep adding rules to 40K and things like that. So it's a little bit different. Remember, Games Workshop got started basically by importing RPGs such as Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, and that's how they really built up their business. Then they started creating their own miniatures. Then they started creating rules for those miniatures and things like that, and that's how they got off and started. And they're definitely not the same company they were in the 70s, as we all probably can figure that one out. So this cover art is entitled No Fear. It's by Dave Andrews, awesome artist who's been with that company for a very long time. Once we open it up and start taking a look at things, it's obviously that 80s feel to it with the paper and things like that. It's kind of newsprint-ish, very very low quality, but it's semi-color, so that's kind of cool, and it's got some full color stuff in there. Warhammer 40K chapter approved the book of the Astronomicon had just come out, and this was actually a supplement for the Rogue Trader main rulebook itself. Now, you may remember Jervis Johnson put out the second book of the Astronomicon in the early 2000s, where it collected a lot of White Dwarf articles, and those articles that actually provided rules for, I believe it was 3rd edition 40K at that time. So there was a lot of that in here, or in that book, and then this was a supplement as well for Rogue Trader, the main rule book before 2nd edition. What we know as 2nd edition basically came out in the mid-90s. So that's just kind of a couple things right there. So studio managist Tom Kirby, big name around those parts these days. A biggest Ryan Ansell. I know he was an artist. I don't know what a biggest is, but I mean in this sense, very interesting terminology here. Obviously, there's a bit of a culture barrier there because I don't know what that means. Lots of different people in here: Phil Gallagher, Rick Priestley, John Blanchett, the art edits. I don't know what that is, but it sounds exciting. Coverist, I guess Dave Andrews with that piece of artwork I just showed you there on the cover. And lots of interesting things going on here. John Blanche actually takes a pretty active role. He's kind of the Jervis Johnson of this day, where he does, like, you can basically write in and ask him questions about the hobby in general. Remember, there was no internet. I keep stressing that, but I don't think people realize exactly how hard it was to learn how to hobby and paint and things like that back then. So actually getting some tips and things like that, if you didn't go up to your local game store and if nobody there even painted, it was very very hard to come by. You'd have to buy a book, or actually spend $30-$40. For some of us, we couldn't do that. So the hobby has definitely come a long ways in that regard. Here on the first page, you got Talisman Timescape, the chapter approved. These are basically the new releases for that time period. Talisman Timescape was more of a card game kind of thing. It wasn't the FFG board game we all know these days. And then there's the chapter approved as well. Here you could get some back issues of White Dwarf going all the way back to 38. Ooh, I can't even imagine how old that would be, but this seems pretty old. Here's some of that stuff that you're going to see in here where it's just RPG stuff. So here's some minis that they basically came out with, and then here's the rules for them. And that was one of the reasons to buy these, these supplements and these editions of things, because that was the only way you could get the rules and things like that for a while. It's kind of like what Forge World does these days. They'll put out a mini, like say the Sikaran, tank, and they'll have experimental rules, but then once they put them in a book, they put them in a book. So it's it's hard to find and things like that. Mail order for Games Workshop here. Now you can kind of see some of their roots. They're doing some RPG books and things like that. Some of the importing they did. Obviously, they don't own the rights to Star Wars, but they're selling Star Wars, the source book, because they basically imported it and retailed it and things. And that's kind of how they started. And that's sometimes I get a little on my soapbox about it because us retailers, some of the big ones out there, Spiky Bits included, we're just basically doing the same thing that Games Workshop started out doing, and it seems like all they ever want to do is just quash us. And, I have, just to go on record, I have no desire to make miniatures and RPG, modules and things like that, and small board games, and the things that basically allowed Games Workshop to rise to prominence. But, they just, I don't know. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But it's very hypocritical in my opinion how they handle things, because that's how they started. Here's some Chaos Centaurs here, where they basically came out with some Centaur models, and there's the stats for them, and they can, basically play in the Warhammer armies, which is basically fantasy, and you could run them in that. Still familiar stat lines we all know and love, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, things like that. This was an interesting article. This is a chapter approved article where basically, you probably remember this series from the late, I guess probably like the early 2000s, where they go over the various stages of the Space Marine Gene Seed implementation and development and things like that. And this is the original article from way back in White Dwarf 98. So it's kind of interesting to read. A lot of the stuff is the same, obviously, because the authors are the same and things like that, but obviously the graphics are a little bit different, but there you go. You see a lot of the Suzanne membrane, the Belcher's gland. I think that was the thing that let them spit poison that melted steel and things like that. Laramens organ. Just a lot of different things that we're used to seeing. This is the origins of them, so it's kind of neat to see. Here's a Dungeon Quest. This is actually a pretty spectacular board game. It's super hard to play. All the editions of this go for so much on eBay. It's nearly impossible to find, and when you do, you could get an expansion set that costs like $5 back in the day for like $70. It's just crazy. It's a very brutal game. It's very grimdarky in how brutal and and difficult it really is, but it's fun sometimes. If you've been drinking. Here we go. Just a small little 40K comic. Little orcs thrown in there for fun. Here's an ad for the Orc Pewter Battle Buggy, obviously the precursor to the War Buggy itself. A very kind of small looking thing there, I guess, and the pound $3.95 for this baby here. I think the current one goes for about $30. Here's a feature of an artist. This guy is Tony Hoff, it looks like, and he did a lot of cool art here. I haven't seen a whole lot of it myself. I didn't recognize too many of it. I think I've seen this one, and there's a self-portrait there. Interesting enough about this gentleman here, he plays Call of Cthulhu, and his favorite band is actually Chumbawamba from, I did not know they existed in 1988, but apparently they did, and he was a big fan of them. Here's some Minotaur models, which are kind of interesting to see. They look more like some Blood Bowl stuff that you would see current day if you special ordered it, things like that. Here's some RPG things. Like I said, a lot of these are modules and different things. This could be the beginning of the Iron Warriors, Chaos Space Marines as we know them. Obviously, this is fantasy RPG type stats, but it's interesting to see it. I did a little reading on it. Nothing too conclusive about anything in here. It's just more RPG stuff. The Mentor Legion, I was surprised to learn that they didn't originate in the Badab War. I guess somebody actually played them way back in the day here, and they just do some different little articles about their background and squad makeup and things like that. If you have one of the old plastic kits from back in the day, from Rogue Trader era, they're actually on the decal sheet. You can actually find them as well as the Sharkadons and the Rainbow Warriors, who apparently don't exist anymore, on that transfer sheet. Grapes of Wrath, another RPG module that's... Oh, there was a couple ads in here. Let's see if we can find one. No, not yet. It's just kind of exciting where they put all the different ads. Here we go. Space Pirates and the Imperial Army, obviously the precursor to Imperial Guard itself. Even if you read some of the Forge World books, they're like, you know, the Imperial Army from the Great Crusade era. Well, there they are right there. Some of the very, very, very old models with the definitely the helmet there that kind of defined their look and feel of that era. We got some more RPG stuff that's silly. Okay, heavy metal section. This is where John Blanche, and I'm not sure, I've never seen a picture of John Blanche, but this could be him. I'm not really sure. It could be, may not be, who knows. So he kind of goes into a lot of different things, and they show off a lot of models. Basically just a lot of painted models, a lot of custom stuff, and there's some squats, which don't exist anymore, and then you got the Imperial Commander, which is basically the precursor to Marnie's Calgar. Some of the old Contemptor and Mark I Dreadnought variants there. And Blanche Issue is actually 25 years old. I mean, now it's a feature, of course, in the White Dwarf as of late, currently in 2013, but way back in 1988, it was in there too. And this is where basically people call, you know, write in and they're like, hey, how do you control ink washes to stop them running? You know, it's just, it seems very basic questions, but back then, this one might have been the only way to find out the answer to it, unless you wanted to spend 40 bucks on an art book or something like that. Here's some more RPG modules, which really don't concern us too much. And then you get to the back where they actually allowed some companies to have ads in the White Dwarf, which of course is unheard of these days. Then we got the 40k Devastators, a new release for Warhammer 40k quote-unquote Rogue Trader, which we all know Devastators these days is a little something different. But here's some cool models sculpted by the Perrys. You got the Imperial Speeder, the Mole Mortar for the Dwarves, or the Squats rather, and the Tarantula weapons platform for the Imperial Guard. So pretty cool stuff there. For £9.99, I'm sure definitely a steal. And there's the other another little ad for the Talisman Timescape card game, which, like I said, it's a lot different from the board game that we play these days. But it's interesting to see, you know, you got fantasy-based stuff, and then, oh, a Space Marine, oh, holy crap, there's a Space Marine, there we go. So anyways, that's pretty much my my video review of this White Dwarf. It's very neat to see kind of a blast from the past there and look back. This was only about 70 pages. I think it's, you know, way less than what they run these days. They're up around the 130 to 150 mark on the White Dwarf, but you know, which may or may not be worth its $10 price. It just kind of depends on how you feel about it. So that's it for this one, guys. Stay in the trenches. Make sure you subscribe to this blog, or to this YouTube channel. Check out the blog, blog.spikybits.com, and make sure you listen to our podcast every week, forgethenarrative.com.
Spiky Bits.